Just to wrap up on this issue,
yes,
so that
so
you can
I just wanted to say
I'll come to you, Bwana Nabwera.
Yeah, he took mic from me, and Newt also got a bite on this. But I wanted to say this, Fred. There are two things here: the manner in which Natembeya was arrested, and what reason he was arrested for. I think this is a critical way of putting it.
Correct.
And my problem is that the political class is giving more weight on the manner of arrest and not the purpose of arrest. The purpose of arrest, as claimed, this is not me, by EACC, is matter of corruption of lost public funds. I was just encouraging my brothers that you cannot lose sight on that and giving weight to how he was arrested more than why he was arrested, because why he was arrested as alleged is on the loss of public funds. And I think that you've got a responsibility more to protect public funds than to protect an individual. So that you leave this matter to court, that if it's established that he was indeed found guilty of pilfering or embezzling public funds, then he must be held accountable. That's my work as a senator. And I'm saying that you need to be consistent on the issue of arrest, and not only by EACC, my friend. It's also by other security agencies that we have seen. I mean, you know, my brother Joe Nyutu is very strategic. You know, he changes depending on where politics finds him. But I don't change according to what politics finds me, because the issues of arbitrary arrest in this country, right, is things that I've fought for as much as possible. Right now, you see him talking about governor being handcuffed. His own minority leader in the Senate, a senator, was arrested when he was protesting in a manner that was demeaning, was bad. That is Honorable Mazaya of Kilifi. He was a member of the but because he was in a political convenience at that time, that he could not be able to talk about arbitrary arrest. He never mentioned a word. In fact, he celebrated in the floor of the House, together with other senators who at that time were aligned with the UDA. Opio Wandai was arrested, the current Waziri for Energy. He did not talk about it like that, arbitrarily. And there are a number of leaders who have been arrested in a way that is demeaning, and Nyutu has never talked about them because for him it's convenient. And that's why I'm telling you that let pressure, I heard Mainak again today in the morning saying, let pressure not take you away from your purpose. And your purpose is to protect devolution such that as you fight for these human rights, make sure that you also fight for the people, that their money is not stolen.
Listening to Nyutu and my brother Eddie, I get a bit worried. And my worry is this, that up to where we are, Eddie is pretending not to understand what public pressure can do in a good case. You know, if you lose sight of that, Eddie, then you are not protecting that devolution. Because if we do things that then the public dismisses as politics, the intended purpose is lost. Because you need the public to run with the government or with the EACC on this matter. So when you are doing a case, you must understand what is the essence of it in terms of intended purpose. And I will want to share with you something. A former governor of Busia, Jammu, was handled the same way. Last week, they threw away the case. Threw away. Because drama took away the case. Now, instead of EACC concentrating on tightening evidence, they rushed to do politics, you know, image building at the extent of actual case. And that's why I'm saddened myself. We know the things that are going wrong. But when you are going for it, make sure you look at all sides and say, I want to carry the public with me on this matter. Because you are talking about public resources. Now, you have talked to hear yourself about Songo. People saying, Mwizi wetu. You know, why did they say Mwizi wetu? Look at that. then you lose it. That is why in this country, I know people who have murder cases, people who have cases of theft, but people go ahead and vote for them because we have not handled it in a manner to carry the public to understand that this is a serious matter. It's a matter of that sits in their bedroom. It is eating their school fees. It is eating their roads. It is eating the electricity they should be having. That is my problem.
All right. Thank you, Bwana Nabwera. And I think we hold that discussion. We stop it there because there's something else that we need to talk about. And these are jitters around the next general election and the date as well, whether or not it will be free and fair. It is part of the conversation even here at TV47. Let's have that story about jitters around the 2027 election so that we come back and discuss even the concerns around the 2027 election from the IEBC's perspective. All right, on the front page of the Standard, there's a story there about 2027 general election at stake, IEBC warning. On the front page of the Star, IEBC vetting order could trigger crisis. Now, we've ignored the issue of IEBC for a while, and it seems that we've decided that things can be swept under the rug, including the issue around the delimitation of boundaries. We defied a constitutional provision on the delimitation of boundaries last year in March when the deadline passed. Kenyans appear to have moved on and decided we can defy that and everything will be okay. But lawyers have gone to the Supreme Court. The matter is before the Supreme Court seeking an advisory opinion. And according to one of the lawyers, it would appear that an election in 2027 without the delimitation of boundaries could be declared null and void. Senator Newto, let's start from there.
Thank you. And although we have departed from the previous matter, Fred, you know, Eddie mentioned my name and said that I change with convenience. It's important that I also have a right of reply. And he has said that we are concentrating on the way the arrest was done instead of concentrating on the substance of the matter, which is pilferage of public funds. But it's important for Eddie to also be a keen listener. I said that EACC should have done more in investigation than in this drama. That's what I had said. Because it's not the way he's arrested that will prove him guilty. It is the evidence that will be adduced before the court. And that's something we had done. Then he says that I change with the political convenience. I want Eddie, probably later, to tell you or to tell viewers any time that I supported violation of human rights. I have never done that. I have never, and I want him to go to the Hansard and bring you, excerpts of any time that I supported, either in the Senate or in the media, of violation of public rights, because I can never do that. But now coming to the issue of IEBC, it is true, and I agree with the concern by IEBC that that if we go to the elections without doing the delimitation and the review of boundaries, then people could go to court. We may open ourselves to litigation, because of course that is not what the Constitution provides otherwise, because this is the 10th year since the boundaries were revealed, Fred. And so it's a constitutional provision which people may base the litigation on after the elections. And I think if I were to be asked, I would say that we need to seek a constitutional interpretation from the Supreme Court, that now that the deadline for review of boundaries is almost catching up with us, what can be done so that the court then, that apex court can then, give guidance so that we do things as per the Constitution. Because why this, I think the drafters of the Constitution made this particular provision in the Constitution is because, populations grow bigger in some areas than others, and so issues of underrepresentation could occur. There are also historical issues, and the people feel that they need to keep reviewing boundaries and what have you. And so I think it's important that the IEBC, like I've submitted, seeks an interpretation from the Supreme Court. Yes. Because they also need, and there is also the issue of time and resources, because they also need to start preparing for the 2027 general elections, which could be very highly contested, and that is why there is a lot of pressure around the elections of 2027, and even a lot of politics happening around the politics of 2027. Fred, if you allow me, you have had people condemn the second deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, for saying that if IEBC in 2027 forces President Ruto on Kenyans, then there could be issues. Everybody I have had, trying to respond to that and condemning Rigathi Gachagua has deliberately ignored the first part of that statement. If IEBC messes with the election and forces President Ruto on Kenyans, because Kenyans are tired. I've not heard Murkomen say or give any guarantee that that the elections will not be messed up with. He is only going to the second part. Everybody is going to the second part and not the first part. So it's very important that IEBC, makes a deliberate decision, and we see them making an effort to see to it that the 2027 general elections are free and fair, because nobody wants our country to be plunged into unnecessary chaos. Okay. And while still at that, I think it's also important that the issues that have been raised about the proposed commissioners, that they be done away with, and Parliament, the National Assembly, before they approve these names, should deal with those matters in a convincing way, so that then the confidence of Kenyans also on the chairman and the commissioners of IEBC will also be boosted. Because we do not want these issues. We do not want tension to start building. So let Kenyans know, let everybody know that everybody has a right to express their concerns and fears of what could happen if 2027 general elections are messed up with.
All right, the story on the front page of the Star talks about the delay in reconstituting the IEBC. Because of that court order, Parliament will not even be able to vet the nominees next week. And we do not know the result of that. Will we need to go back to the drawing board and restart the reconstitution or the recruitment process? That could cause delays. Of course, there's an issue of time, that there are time constraints. Any new commission would have to deal with voter registration, the by-elections that are there, and now the possibility that they could be forced to delimit or to conduct a delimitation of boundaries. Due to the concerns, budgetary or otherwise, there seems to be this notion that there's a larger plot to delegitimize the election date of 2027, that probably delay the date, or because of these irregularities, force the elections to be invalidated. Do you agree that there could be such a conspiracy?
Number one, forget about delegitimizing the election date, because the election date, for the first time in the Kenyan psyche, it's printed in the constitution. So a constitutional...
There's even argument about whether it is 2027 or 2026.
Yeah,
there's a lot of debate around it.
Yeah, so the debate notwithstanding, the fundamental document that we all must depend on is the Constitution of Kenya. Whatever the Constitution of Kenya described as the election date, and the Supreme Court is the biggest house that can be able to interpret this, and for us, that becomes the date. So that one is a smaller...
But let me challenge you on that, because Article 89
yes.
on delimitation of electoral units, it's also very
I'm coming to that.
It's also very expressive on the date and when delimitation should occur.
Yes.
We defied that
yes.
without consequence.
Yes.
Could we not defy the election date as well?
I'm coming to that, because one of the biggest challenges that we have, Fred, is the functionality. And I'm talking about functionality of our courts. Because our courts make some pronouncements within, if a matter is brought to you that has got implication on constitutional timelines, because it's only the courts that can be able to help us sometimes implement some of these things within time. And then you, delay those pronouncements, then it has got serious implication. And I feel like the court sometimes then have a leeway of just making a judgment that would then ignore the substantive timelines that were given. A good case in example was when, just after the election, when the court were faced with the question of who is the majority and who is the minority in Parliament. This is something that must be declared so that Parliament can function immediately. The ruling comes 2.5 years later, Fred. So our courts must start being the custodian of the Constitution in terms of interpretation. But that said, we have seen there are a number of other factors that affect the drawing of boundaries. One of them is the census issues. You'll ask yourself, will we be able to use which census? I think you can only use a practical census, census of 2019, which, if you look at that, the way it impacts the delineation is counter, in the sense that somebody would argue that probably based on that census, maybe the populations haven't shifted as much. But that's a problem. But the issue of timeline also comes in place, which the timeline issue here, we saw the legal aid team, and perhaps the senior people here can tell us. The legal aid team actually, despite the obstacles and impediments of time, they actually did work on delineation in a record less than 2 years, and they worked it out. I think this is where we find ourselves now. Number one, we must encourage the courts to pronounce themselves very fast on this IBC issue, so that people know, should we go and do the process of reconstituting the panel should go the process of reconstituting the IBC, or is it a green light so that this individual can take office immediately? And if they were to take office immediately, then as a young person, and I always tell this to Senator John Newton, is that the matter of time can be captured by the matter of technology. Because the relation of boundaries that used to be done in 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there has been more advancement in technology right now. If you look at the tech around GPS, the global positioning systems that can be able to help you map both population and even look at drawing of boundaries. If you look at data, it is now more advanced. We're in a more advanced technological inclining that if this particular commission was to take office immediately, then I would encourage them to go fast and be able to embrace technology, embrace modernity in terms of just dealing with some of these issues. But the pertinent one that is not just a matter of technology is the issue of population and census. And I think that is the critical one that we must all look at.
What about the politics of population? Because I do understand that some of this could be politically engineered. There are people who are not so very comfortable with the delimitation of boundaries at this point.
Yes, and that's why I say that is the one that technology cannot answer. The politics of it must be critically looked at, because if you don't look at it critically from the political standpoint, then you will have a lot of back and forth, people fighting back and forth. But I think that there's also a critical thing that you've mentioned, that we have got by-elections. We have got, I think, 7 MPs by-elections, and I think there's 1 Senate by-election, and about 9 wards by-elections that need to happen. It is critical that this becomes the litmus test of this commission, because it has got a lot in terms of what you need to talk about, public confidence. And that public confidence and trust will be built on how they exercise those by-elections as well, because those by-elections have got implication in terms of voter registration, whether you will open it up for young people to be able to register and vote in those particular constituencies. Those by-elections have got idea around transparency and verification of results. And more importantly, there is technological know-how that must be used there, which again affects the idea of technology in boundary delineation. So this is something that must happen fast, but it's upon the courts to help the country settle as
We still don't have the IEs.
Fred,
counting months to election.
Fred, unfortunately, I'm in that group of people who talk of common good.
Yes.
Very well. Fred, you know, people want to trivialize this issue of delimitation and an election coming 2020. Anything that one does that will affect the date, people not going to an election in August 2027, Kenyans will resist.
I agree.
So, if you were to ask Kenyans today, and I'm talking as a commoner, if I went to my constituency and asked them, what is important today? Is it limitation of the constituency or going to an election? They will say, we want an election even if you were to call it today. Period. if you look at this constitution we have, it says in the preamble, acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creation. I'll jump on and come here. Recognizing the aspiration of all Kenyans for government based on the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and rule of law. And in 258, 259, it says, this constitution shall be implemented in a manner that promotes its purposes, values, and principles. Then, Fred, it falls...
Does that invalidate Article 89?
I want to make my point. I haven't even made my point. There are 4 things you will need to look at. Does this country, as where the economy you have today, have more money to do the following? Do a census? Because you need a census. We can't go to do delimitation with that thing that was declared in court that some parts of this country, the figures were manipulated. We can't. Because we would be playing into the gallery of having a manipulated election. That's number 1. Number 2, do you have money in this economy, the way it is today, to go and do that limitation? Please, limitation, as much as my brother is talking about GPRAs and all that, it is about communities, people. You will need to go and convince why a certain small community has to move from where they are to belong to another constituency. You have to go and talk to a certain group of clan why they should be joined with this other. It is not as simple as people imagine. Number 3, which is critical for me, you already have bending issues on the IBC timetable. You have constituencies unrepresented. You have wards unrepresented. Which one comes first? And already, this if you are to go by the constitutional timelines, it says you must achieve a certain time before you go to an election when you do delimitation. Now, if you were to do a delimitation that ends within 6 months to an election, how do you operationalize it?
Allow me to read the article. Article 89 on delimitation of electoral units, Section 2. The IEBC shall review the names and boundaries of constituencies at intervals of not less than 8 years and not more than 12 years. 12 years lapsed.
Elapsed.
But any review shall be completed at least 12 months before general election.
This is what I'm talking about now.
Meaning that by August next year, we should be done
How
with
can you achieve that?
But does the inability, probably due to lack of resources, invalidate a provision in our constitution, Senator? Because this is the same thing. If we defy and express a provision of our constitution, aren't we going therefore to open the box to defying even the election date and the provision
Fred, before Senator comes in, I hadn't even finished my point. So I said, if you are to read that Article 259 and you look at the preamble of this constitution, it provides for 2 things here. That our constitution is progressive. Our interpretation must be purposeful.
It is an express provision about dates, limits, deadlines. The same way that we provide that the election shall be on the second Tuesday, I think, of August after 5 years. If we defy this one, there should also be consequences and probably even the possibility of defying the election date.
Exactly, friend. And, that's the greatest fear. And you know, some of these things that are happening are not, some of us are not just seeing them happening, you know, organically. You know, that there are names that have been, you know, selected by the president, you know, picked by the president from, of course, the list that was provided to him by the IEBC selection panel. Probably somebody somewhere picked some names because they knew that those names would, of course, attract litigation, like we are seeing already, with, you know, an idea or with a plan to have the elections delayed. Because, of course, I've listened to my 2 colleagues, and I like what Nabi is saying, that, and I agree with it, that Kenyans would not want to hear that anybody is planning to extend the date of the election even by 1 day. But then you see, there could be some constitutional matters that may necessitate such a delay. Because, I mean, just let me express myself. I mean, if there are these delays, for example, if, for example, now this litigation takes time, and I like what Eddie has said, that our courts are letting us down sometimes because they need to deliver timely decisions. And I totally agree with him. The matter of, determining who was the majority and the minority in the National Assembly and the Senate is a matter that was unnecessarily delayed. I mean, the judges ought to have banned the midnight oil. And so, if there is this litigation, and of course Nabi doesn't want to hear me say that, but there is a litigation about these names that the president has selected, and this litigation, the judges do not play ball, and they delay this. So that again, by the time we are coming up with the, IEBC commissioners, then we have been overtaken by the dates constitutionally. So what do? There will have to be an interim arrangement, and that interim arrangement, of course, would mean that the president continues occupying office. And you have to look at this with the backdrop of the fact that Senator Cheralgei, our colleague, had proposed an extension of this term to 7 years. Of course, we shut it down. It did not see the light of day. But then it tells you somebody somewhere could be having some idea. And so if you cannot do it through parliament, why don't we delay, the formation of IEBC so that whether we like it or not, then the status quo will remain for at least maybe another 2 years, because maybe somebody is very certain that they cannot make it back to State House. And so anything is possible, because politics is the art of the possible. So what we are saying is that we are very concerned about this, and the side that I belong to, Fred, I can tell you, we are saying if it is possible, let the names that the president has presented before, the National Assembly, let the National Assembly, approve those names so that we pass, because we are confident we are winning this election at the side that I'm in. And so whether somebody brings even their relatives, we are okay. Because what we fear most is using these, going against these names, litigation and what have you, whose end result, in my opinion, would be a delayed election, a delayed delimitation of boundaries, a delayed, election, which would plunge this country into chaos. We would better have these commissioners with their chairman, even if they are biased. Of course, we would better be able to guard our votes rather than delay this process.
Fred, there is something I must say here, and I must say it in the strongest term possible. There is any chance, any imagination to postpone the date of the election. It is not possible. And especially, and I've said it, where the Constitution has said in black and white that these elections will be organized on this date in our country. You can't imagine that. The only problem is that these delays will give you a weaker IBC in terms of preparedness. Okay? Because by the time you finish to get this IBC constituted, then you will have a weaker IBC, because it just needs time to be able to build capacity of an institution, to be able to build capacity of the individuals to handle election, to be able to put up the machinery, the technology that needs to address not just the election, but all those responsibilities given to IBC. So don't even dream that it is possible to postpone a date of election in this country. That you will be trading into very dangerous grounds for this country. That's not possible. But I must say this. The IBC constitution, the delineation of boundaries, the management of elections are by large, under Article 1 of the Constitution, a political process.
Yeah.
Okay? The reason why the political process is because the sovereignty of this country is given to the people, and then it's interpreted that the sovereignty will then be exercised directly or indirectly through our elected representatives. Now, where does the problem come from? I have pointed one at the delays that we see in our courts that are not in that spirit of working with the tune and the need and the mood of the country and of the people. This is a problem. But the bigger problem lies in Parliament. The bigger problem lies in Parliament because the people have donated the power of discussing these issues, initiating these conversations, and dealing with them in a timely manner to the Parliament of Kenya. And it's unfortunate that the people of Kenya did not give the Senate as much legislative power as they gave the National Assembly. It's very unfortunate. This is a conversation we're going to have, and I think that this one, I hope.
Do you think the National Assembly has been intentionally reluctant to discuss the boundaries?
I'm going to that because I want to point it out. I feel like we have got GMO politicians in the National Assembly. Why do they call them GMO politicians? They're GMO politicians because during the time of people we admired, like during the time of Honorable Martha Karua, Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga in Parliament, Honorable Anyang' Nyong'o in Parliament, Honorable Gitobu Imanyara in Parliament, Honorable James Orengo in Parliament, and the likes. Just go back to those times, Shikuku, that my brother was referring to here. This would be a discourse. A discourse would mean that a parliament would sit and would alter any kind of house proceedings and focus on what is important to the country. Like the issue of IBC is so important that you cannot understand why in the National Assembly this is not the only business they're transacting. Because it used to be during those times that you would see, and I miss those days when I look at them in the clips, you would see parliamentarians walking to court to go and listen to these proceedings and putting pressure in courts to do things that would be important to the people of Kenya and are of emergency to the people of Kenya. The way our courts are now behaving, and I'm not saying that they should overreach. It's not about overreaching. It's that this is a political process, that the interpretation of that political process lies in Parliament to the extent that MPs must put pressure on all institutions to be able to act in a timely manner, to be able to see the significance of these issues to the people, because otherwise, judges will just sit back and say, this is just another matter. Right. I'll deal with it in 2 years' time, I'll deal with it in 3 months' time, I'll deal with it in 1 year's time, when they have got serious constitutional obligation. So one thing that Kenya should do, as I finish, Fred, they must give the Senate of Kenya a full mandate on legislation, where the Senate of Kenya can initiate some bills, and it's not saying that this is a county bill and this does not concern counties, because leaving this issue with only the National Assembly has proven to be way fatal for the country when they cannot run this thing as a discourse.
Well, Nabi Nabora, you're a member of the National Assembly. And listening to you, you also seem a bit reluctant
first of all,
to engage in this delimitation of boundaries.
That's not heckling. I don't deal with people who think by demeaning others they are making a point. That's childish, irregular, unacceptable. You know, first of all, he does not understand that he is a member of Parliament. Parliament constitutes of 2 houses. He keeps on referring to members of the National Assembly as MPs. He does not even know himself. He's defined as a member of Parliament.
I said Senate, yes, my friend.
But we can run through your nini here. Please, we can run through.
I am well.
Then we can run through. Number two, I need to help Moko understand. He has a limitation in understanding. On this issue, as a member of Parliament, as a member of Senate, if he strongly feels so, he can bring it up. He can talk to anyone. He can go even to that court. He has said he used to see members of Kinashikuku go to court. What has stopped him from going to court? Nothing has stopped him. But let me tell you something. You know, he has not even read this constitution properly. Under Article 89, it has even a provision. You know, there's no crisis. People are trying to create a crisis where there is none. And I want to tell you, in Dumuli, I can be, and I'm telling you, put the day today. That is the exit route the court is going to use. I can tell you for free. This constitution is very progressive. 89 says, if a general election, if a general election, 8940, limitation of, if a general election is to be held within 12 months after the completion of the review by the commission, the new boundary shall not take effect for purposes of that election. So where is the crisis? All what this means, once IBC is in place, they start the machinery. If it will be not within 12 months, before 12 months to the election, all they will do, they say we have delimited and we have met the requirement of the Constitution. However,
But you've just ignored Section 2.
but please, you must read it. That's why I'm saying, don't read one in isolation of the other. Because the Constitution anticipates there can be delay. That's why they are providing for it. That if there is a delay, that you are going into that, it's here. I'm not reading my own Constitution. Then, all that will happen, you will go to the election, but with the old boundaries. What's the problem with that? There's no crisis.
What happens to the fact
So what
that
I agree with the MOC, there's no reason for postponing an election. This Constitution has a way out.
What happens to the fact that we have defied Section 2, that we have gone beyond the deadline provided by the same Constitution?
Very good. Do you know why in this Constitution, Article 259, which I referred to you, it says advances the rule of law. There is no way you are going to have done the delimitation where there was no IBC. That's why in interpretation it says, when you are interpreting this Constitution, ensure that it is advancing the rule of law.
In the Muli,
It's only the last 2. It is only in the last 2 years that we've not had an IBC. We had an IBC that would have done the same job.
Look, in the Muli, I've been called childish, and I was very quiet about this, and I think that.
I didn't call him childish. I said what he said is childish.
And
I don't.
I will not debate it.
Let's
I will not
settle this
debate
because
it.
we
But
need
I
to
want
wrap up
my brother to understand here that you can read for us this Constitution 10 times, if you want. The same way lawyers will read it, the same way business people will read it. We do not want academic exercise. What I said, and I said it very respectfully, is that all the interpretation of the Constitution and the power to actually give it life is a political process, which is why we have got Parliament, the National Assembly, and the Senate that are supposed to give the political life of this discourse, right, and make it a discourse to the people. What is wrong with that? And I've questioned the role of National Assembly, not because I'm running away from the role of the Senate, but because some of the substantive motions and legislation work have been squarely given to the National Assembly. This is a fact. This is not me saying. If you read, if you read Article 95, if you read Article 104, if you go all the way to 116, the legislative power that have been given to the National Assembly is way too much that I wish them the courage to make this a political discourse. And I'm saying this as I finish, Fred, even as we speak right now, if you read Article 229 of the Constitution about the Auditor General reports, that after every 3 months, after they receive this report, they must then consider this report and approve or disapprove of them. And that role, right, that role of the National Assembly has got serious impact on Article 203 on dividing national resources. The bill, what we call the Revenue Division Bill, has just come from Parliament yesterday. We received it in Senate and we are discussing it in Senate. Do you know, Fred, that the basis for which we are dividing money between the National Assembly and the counties is based on the last approved report by National Assembly, which is 2021 financial year, when the Auditor General has finished up last year. What is wrong by encouraging my brothers? And I'm not calling them out for lack of any reason. What is wrong by encouraging National Assembly to take a political discourse on issues that are of national importance?
Allow me to give you each one of you a minute only for your final remarks. Start with you, Senator Nyoto.
Thank you, Fred, and my two brothers have really patronized this debate and left me by the wayside where it's okay. Probably in their concluding remarks, they can tell us what would happen, because both of them hold the view that there is no way we are not going to have 2027 elections, I think on the 9th day of August or something like that. What happens if there will be no IEBC? Because looking at section 259 that Nabi is talking about, you know, the rule of law, which if I was going to interpret it then would mean that all the issues, the litigations surrounding IEBC commissioners of course, have to be dispensed with before, of course, we form the ABC. So what happens if these litigations are delayed, and by, like say even July of 2027, we still do not have IEBC? What would happen? That is important for them to say, and I think it's important that we call out on the court. And I want to agree with my colleague, Senator Eddie, that the Constitution granted far too many powers to the National Assembly to the exclusion of the Senate.
Okay.
I mean, it's about all the money bills. It's the National Assembly that decides on this. They are the only people that vet. Even these commissioners will be vetted by the National Assembly. The CS is everybody. The Senate has no role. And don't forget that a senator represents, I represent 7 counties. So I have no voice at all about these matters, about who becomes CS, about, even important matters like election. Okay. That is something that's a very genuine and valid concern that Eddie has. Finally, let me call upon the government to let people do their politics. Let Natembeya build himself as a kingpin of the Rift Valley. Let Rigathi Gachagua build himself as a kingpin of the mountain and beyond. Let the government stop shivering, because, Fred, I can tell you that President Ruto hangs only on Raila Amolo Odinga. If Raila Amolo Odinga departs him, President Ruto is minced meat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Bwana Nabina Bwera, just a minute for your parting shot.
This is what I would want to say. Part of the problem of this country is the argument is giving. And I want to ask Kenyans, please get out of political kingpins.
Yeah.
They have not helped the country. That is why this country is being held hostage by people who call themselves kingpins. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Eddie.
Mine is very simple. The issue of IEBC is such an important matter that the political class, especially the National Assembly, must make a priority and make it a discourse in conversation so that we can be able to restore the confidence of the public that we will have an institution that will run a free and fair election. Number two, I want to condemn in the strongest term possible any voices, especially political voices, that want to make the issue of 2027 election any issue that is tribal or regional or kingpinship, because those kind of conversation will only make the country volatile towards the next election. And we have seen this with Honorable Rigathi Gachagua, who recently in an interview said that if elections are not free and fair in 2027, then 2007 will be a Christmas. It will be like a Christmas. I think this is very reckless statements that we must not make. Let us have a country where we can agree to disagree, but most importantly, the political class can work for the people to ensure that we have got institutions that work for them, and more importantly, to make sure that the next election happen on time and happens in a manner that gives confidence to the people and is based on issues that affect the people and not personalities.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Senator Eddie Okech, Senator Migori.
Give me a half an hour.
I'm not saying you don't want to reintroduce.
I've not said, they have referred in their remarks. In their remarks,
half a minute, you give me
nobody has said, Senator. I would have appreciated if they told us what happens if we do not have IEBC, because that is what I had requested them.
And I think that's...
Finally, I'm not promoting politics of kingpinship. I only said everybody has to consolidate home before they enter into
Kenya is being held hostage by kingpins.
Thank you, gentlemen. Senator Joe Nyoto of Moranga, Eddie Okech, Senator Migori, allow me to acknowledge you. Allow me to acknowledge
with kingpins.
Senator Nyoto, allow me to acknowledge my panelists. Senator Eddie Okech of Migori and Nabina Bwera, MP Lugari constituency. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for a vibrant debate, and karibu sana tena to TV47. Of course, 2027 general election at stake. IEBC warns an IEBC vetting order could trigger crisis. Two different angles on the IEBC. That has been our discussion this morning. After the break, we switch gears and talk matters mental health. Why men do not speak up? Arno Dida will be leading that conversation. My name is Fred Indemuli. Good morning.